I guess. What do I normally put in that damn stuff? MCT oil MCT. So I should be good to go. My brain should be firing on every cylinder.
All right, then we're going to start the dramatic music.
Okay.
All right, and welcome to the Rose 777 channel. I have a bunch of people who are currently joining this StreamYard, so I think that maybe the StreamYard link was shared by mistake instead of the YouTube channel. So if anybody is getting, kicked out, they probably think that, we don't want them to be here or something, or maybe I'll just let them sit there backstage. But thank you everyone for joining us tonight. We're here with Kurt Kallenbach. And we're here with Keith, also known as El Perro. And we're both just fans of Kurt's way of thinking and all of the research that he's done. And Kurt has been a guest on Pro 777 Radio for a number of episodes. And so we're here for an update. And we want to know how you're doing, Kurt, what's on your mind, what's new. And I have a bunch of old quotes that I'd like to share with you and have you comment on from the past. Because you said so many smart things back in 2019 when we first met. Kurt, are you the one that's making such loud noises in the background?
No, that's probably Debbie. I'm not making. I'm completely silent back here. There is no noise on my side at all.
Okay.
Wait a minute. Can you hear this?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That was Debbie putting a new battery in my mouse.
That's good. Hi,
Debbie. Rose said hi. Now she's getting the hell out of here and she's shutting the door behind her. So.
No problem at all whatsoever. It's just a miracle that we even got you here without too much technical difficulty. And welcome, Keith. I don't think that we have spoken enough. I've seen you around, and I know that you're interested in legal/law/lawful and the birth certificate. So thank you for joining us. This is awesome.
Yes, absolutely.
Hey, Keith.
How you doing, Kurt?
Always good.
Good deal.
All right, so Kurt, when you're not talking, you could mute yourself if you need to make noise, okay? Or breathe heavily, because I can hear you breathing heavily into your microphone when you're not talking. Are you still there?
Who, me? Yes.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me breathing now?
Yes.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that everything's working properly before we get into things. Okay, so Keith, do you actually want to kick it off and talk about how you discovered Kurt? Because the way I discovered him was my friend Joe just sent me a link in 2016. I started working with Crow for, I think it was September of 2017. And I was just trying to convince Crow, we've got to find him. We've got to find Kurt. And I finally found him in 2019. And then we've just been great friends ever since. So what's your story? How did you discover Kurt?
Well, I was one of these guys that pushes the travel issue. And I'd gotten pulled over and they took my truck and everything. And I was in a court situation because of that. And I was doing some research and I came across him on a YouTube channel where he was talking about the legal deception and the mother's birth waters and all that. And that took me down the path of my legal research for the last 10 years. And I don't know exactly how it happened, but are you still in the Quad City area, Curtis? Because last I knew, we were kind of close. It was only a matter of 2-3 hours or so.
I'm about an hour south of Madison, Wisconsin, in Rockford, Illinois, right now.
Okay, yeah, yeah, and so we're not too far away. And somehow I'd gotten his phone number and called and talked to him, and he explained a couple things to me about the legal system, the paperwork, and that's pretty much all it took. And that guided me down the path that I took on the legal framework of the documentation that is established before we're even born, known as a birth registration, and that actually comes from a what's called a journal, a prenatal journal, where there's no name attached to it except mom's name. It's just giving some health characteristics according to mom. So, but then when mom gives birth, there's a name that's established, and there, in that establishment of that name, many people have left the ways of the family Bible and the register there and recording it there, and gone to the birth registration, obvious by indoctrination or whatever you want to call it. But that bifurcation is the taking of one's Christian name, the actual given name, and the legacy name, the paternal name on the father's side, and doing a combining a conjunction of those names into what's called a legal name, which everybody uses as a first name and last name. That is entirely the public record that they have on the individuals, and everybody's putting their data elements into that record as if though it belongs there, and it doesn't. That bifurcation of the record kind of implies everybody's a citizen, which is a member of the association. And by birth, you can't be a member of something that would take away from your natural existence. And that's exactly what this paperwork system does in my research. That person that's used as a veil for one's humanity and spiritual presence.
All right, I muted Kurt because he has background noise. So what I'm going to do, Kurt, you're listening. I'm going to unmute you when I'm done with my spiel. I'm going to read what I have on our C.O.W.A.R.D.S playlist. And then what I'd like to do is just read a couple of short early quotes just to kick us off. And I think having both of you comment on these quotes would make for a really interesting conversation. So first off, what I have written here, and then Kurt, you can always ask me to update this if you don't think that it's specific enough. But I have written here, this is what's currently publicly facing. Kurt encourages critical reflection on societal norms and legal constructs that shape personal identity and spiritual beliefs. He encourages individuals to question the foundations and understandings of time and origin, prompting deeper introspection into how these constructs impact our lives and worldview. Kurt advocates for a more naturalistic understanding rooted in the moment of fertilization rather than the societal or religious constructs imposed later. Okay, so there's deep discussions that go on with Kurt on the shows that we've done with him about the societal systems and legal constructs. He expresses skepticism about the current legal framework, particularly highlighting birth certificates as instruments that bind individuals into systems of control. He argues that these documents impose obligations and restrict freedoms, pointing out that they are part of a larger scheme dating back to significant legal ruling. So this is supposed to be like the most basic way of trying to get someone who's brand new to the topic and who has no idea about the definition of an arrested development or the tertium quid. This is like, okay, this is who this guy is and this is what he's about. And then I have all of the episodes that we've done along with your podcast, New Word Order, your website, supremebeing.life, your book, Right of Way, a Pacific transcription, and then this bonus playlist with basically what I would call the best apprentice of Kurt, who goes by sui generis. And he really goes into the paperwork, and I'll let Kurt talk more about him. But that's the playlist I just wanted to make sure everyone knew about who was listening today. I'm going to put that into the chat right now for people who want to catch up from the beginning with all of these episodes. And so now I'm going to unmute you, Kurt, because of the background noise. It's not your fault at all. It's just the room you're in. You're unmuted right now. And I wanted to ask you if you wanted to respond to these two quotes. There's a difference between man made in the image and likeness of God and the image made by man's imagination. The state lives by the latter, its fiction pretending to be flesh. And then all law begins at the moment we separate from the truth of our origin. Birth is not creation. It's a legal event. Creation happened at conception. And so I wanted to ask you about your use of the word conception, since we like to focus on fertilization, which might be 14 days apart. Was that just like a misspeaking during the first episode when you said conception, or do I have things asked backwards?
I probably misspoke.
Okay.
I probably said conception when I meant fertilization, but I'd have to look at the transcript to see, because it might have been very specific to something. Conception is implantation into the uterine wall, which happens 7 days or more after creation. I should say this, and I know that I probably said it on one of your other calls, but by the way, thank you for that introduction. You make me sound a lot smarter than I am. Anyway, but here's the situation. I wrote letters based to multiple recipients, multiple officials, starting in 2000. Well, actually, I've been writing letters since 2012, but the letters that were very specific to, we'll call it, that government, that republic, that system, started in around 2018. They started after I placed an affidavit on deposit at the Winnebago County Recorder's Office. And the affidavit, I'm just going to read it, right? Not the affidavit, but I'm going to read the title of the affidavit. The title to the affidavit is, I got it right here in my hands, because it's a long title. But here's the title to the affidavit, which, by the way, was recorded on October 16th, 2018. Wow, that's almost 6 years ago to the day, huh? The affidavit title is an affidavit confirming my zygote as the singular, historical, cultural, and scientific matter of fact, proving my personal, private, and confidential property, paramount equity, found within my original DNA birthday cake, aka my baggage and effects, aka my placenta. That was an affidavit that has never been rebutted, and it's also an affidavit that I sent to the Illinois Department of Public Health official. So the first recipient of that affidavit was the Illinois Department of Public Health, which is the highest office in Illinois. Interestingly, between that letter and a couple others, he quit. He quit that job, which is the highest, greatest job for an attorney / medical doctor in Illinois. He quit. After that, after I sent the IDPH a letter, I started thinking, okay, wait a minute here. If I want to go all the way to the top, in other words, the place where I came in, the port of entry to the United States, who would I contact? Well, that's who was it? I'm trying to think of her name. The Secretary of Homeland Security. Well, the Secretary of Homeland Security received a letter from me, one letter at this time, and 17 days later, she quit. So now the first two recipients that received any information or letters from me, they quit their jobs. One last thing I'll say is that I sent multiple letters to both the chairman of the National Security Council, which is the president, and the president in the capacity of president, before he left office in November of 2000 and I think 20. What would have been 2020? When he came back into office, armed with all the information he received from me over the years, he came back into office and started referring to himself as the fertilization president.
I thought of you right away as soon as I was like, oh my gosh.
People have no idea what I am doing to rid this place of the fictional realm, the fictitious realm. And I'm working on a letter right now that is based upon everything I know up to this day. And I just did a new podcast today, and I'm gonna self-promote, which I've never actually done. The podcast I did today is episode 133, and it's at New Word Order, and the episode is called Truth Has No Middle Ground. And I'm going to say to whoever's listening to this call right now, that if for $7, get the subscription to this podcast, listen to this call, and quit if you want. I'm serious. This call by itself is worth the $7. It's 3 hours long, 3 hours and 10 minutes or whatever. But I'm going to say that for $7, it'll change your life. And I did it this morning. So it's everything I know up to now. And it's that important. Truth has no middle ground. And when you finally understand what I'm saying, everything else that's happening in the world, all the fictitious nonsense disappears. It disappears. And by the way, one last thing before I shut the hell up for a minute is that I have 3 books out, Rose. Right of Way came out in 2023. First in Time came out in 2024. And Of Sound Mind came out in 2025. These 3 books are at the Library of Congress. And I'm telling you right now, between these 3 books, nobody in the world in those capacities is safe to be doing what they're doing. These 3 books remove all plausible deniability everywhere in the world. So this world is changing really fast. Even the digital ID means absolutely nothing to me. You have nothing to fear if you understand what the truth of the matter is. Digital ID is nothing different other than a link electronically. That's the only difference from where we are today with the fiat currency and everything else. It doesn't bother me at all. Everything they're doing, it doesn't affect me at all. So that's where I'm at today. Oops.
Awesome. I want to hand it over to Keith. And I'm so glad that you started your podcast. And I'm so glad that you are putting together this information for people who can become members to support you, because you've been doing this work for so long and given so freely. It just reminds me of this one day when I emailed you and you were so pissed off. And this is due to your computer illiteracy, so I thought because you were victimized, but you had this P-Cloud. So you had everything, uploaded to P-Cloud, and you were freely giving out everything to anybody who wanted it. And like one day, someone downloaded everything at once, and it like put you over the edge, so that you had to like buy something. You've always given everything away so freely. So I agree that for $7, you really are getting access to such interesting information. And maybe this is a good segue to ask you, Keith, to the people that might listen to what Kurt says without understanding the legal definitions and kind of starting from the beginning with a good foundation. People say, how do you put this information into practice? How does this affect me? And the way I do it is I say that just the spirit of knowing. People keep joining. That's what that noise is. I'm so sorry. If anyone has joined backstage, I put the actual YouTube link into the private chat so that you can join where you're supposed to be. So sorry for whatever confusion occurred. But yeah, go ahead, Keith. I'll just hand it over to you there.
Well, it's interesting. Kurt and I haven't talked in quite some time now, but our research has led us basically to the exact same idea. And what I want to expand upon is how much it permeates into everybody's life individually, starting from the day before you're even born, that day of fertilization, and something starts happening, and something happens in mom, and she either recognizes it rather soon, most of the time, but eventually she realizes she's pregnant and she's going to be bringing forth another life. And this is a natural occurrence. And we're the only creature that uses a hospital institution to do such things, because it's a matter of comfort and convenience. And that whole comfort and convenience is based on one fear, that somewhere along the line, somebody might lose a baby. This happens every day, regardless of how much you can do to try to prevent it. So one of the basic things is that we've been socially conditioned to accept certain comforts and conveniences for our, quote, safety. And it actually becomes a detriment. And that detriment, through that birth registration and everything, and all the other indoctrination, we end up with a public education system that, alongside with that bifurcation of not doing the registering in the family Bible anymore, it's now everything is registered in the public record. So you have a baby that's starting into kindergarten, and he's going to be registered somewhere. You have him born in the hospital, and that registration, literally under 42 U.S. Code 1395X, they define the event, which is inpatient hospital services, beginning on the first day. So mom goes in to the hospital and registers to give birth instead of bearing young. So the language itself is part of the indoctrination. Then when she's registered, now it's literally known as a spell of illness. That's what it's defined as. Inpatient hospital services beginning on the first day under 42 U.S. Code 1395X. The definition literally says spell of illness. Well, if it's mom giving natural or bearing her young naturally, that's not an illness. That's a natural event. So right there, just by the language, things are changing and nobody pays attention to it. They think, oh, that's nothing, but consequentially over the vast amount of venues and jurisdictions that they have in all those various different registrations, every last one of them is just impounding it more and more in person rather than in your natural spiritual being. And this is what the importance of that definition of person is all about. And along with that, there's other ones: resident, U.S. citizen. Everybody believes that they are a resident simply because of its general term. But in the law of, or in the legal venues, they have specifics as to what it's used for. And that
Hey,
is,
Keith.
Yep.
Okay, before you go any further, I want to just add something to the idea of residency.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is huge.
Interrupt has been granted.
This is huge.
Hey, he's got it more than I do. I'm still trying to get some of the stuff he's got. So
Okay. This is going to take just a second, but or multiple seconds. But here's the thing: is that the moment of creation, when dad's sperm fertilizes mom's ovum, and that moment of creation results, the product of that is the zygote. The zygote is now floating freely in the waters of mother. So the moment of creation is actually maritime. When I hear people screaming they're a man on the land, they have no idea what's actually happening. Your kingdom, your monozygotic maritime kingdom, monarchy, is maritime. So your kingdom is of the water. That's why everything is admiralty. And this is where people completely lose it when I say that. But here's my point. About 7 days after that maritime monarchy is created, it lands in the uterine wall. It lands there. In other words, Genesis 2:2, on the seventh day, God rests. Where does God rest? In the uterine wall. Implantation. Implantation into the uterine wall is now called conception, and conception is when legally mom is considered pregnant. So creation, 7 days earlier, is not pregnancy. Implantation into the uterine wall is pregnancy. So there's a space, there's a gap between creation and pregnancy where you exist, but they say you don't. Now, here's what's important. When you land into the uterine wall, that is where you reside for the next 9 months or so. That's your residency. You're resident. Now, interesting is that when you come out of the womb, when baby comes out, still attached to the umbilical cord, which is still attached to that residency, your castle that is in there, connected to that uterine wall, when they clamp and cut the cord, you, baby, are disconnected from your kingdom, but the castle, the ark you came in on, is still on the ground of that uterine wall. When that comes out as the fetal-maternal placenta, it still evidences residency in the womb. The fetal-maternal placenta is evidence of residency, and when they record that material coming out of mom, that record of your residency gets a title. In my case, the title of that residency, which is a land warrant, is Curtis Richard Kallenbach, known as the birth certificate. Birth certificate evidences my residency in the womb. And one last thing about the word record. The word record means an unsurpassed statistic, which means the record only evidences infancy. So that infancy is a resident still in the womb. You got to think about the matrix now. You're still in the matrix according to the fetal-maternal placenta. So the residency actually is evidence of you still being in in mom. That's the resident. So the record reflects a residency because it's the fetal-maternal link, the connection to mom. You're still in mom according to the record. So that's the resident. I'm just saying right now that residency, all the paper in the world, and all the paperwork in the world will not explain why you're a resident. The residency is in the womb. You've never come out of her because the fetal-maternal placenta, which got that record, the birth certificate, the land warrant, that's residency in the womb.
Well,
Okay.
that would explain
Yeah,
all these. That would explain all these men these days thinking they can get pregnant. Is that the false patriarch, the false residency?
Well, there you go. But they created a world where man can create man, and they do it through paper.
Yep.
Okay.
The paper creation.
Yeah, 1 U.S.C. 1 number words, numbers and numbers denoting gender, whatever. But it's got the definition of singular means plural, and plural means singular. Male means female, and female means male. That's what the false patriarch presents. That spell of illness and the insanity.
All right. I want to throw out a couple more Kurt quotes for both of you to respond to. How about this time around? Keith will respond first, and Kurt will generate his whole response to both of us. Are you ready?
Yep.
Okay. So from episode 188, you can't be both the creation and the creator of the same thing. When you sign the paperwork, you're not giving life, you're giving jurisdiction. Every contract in man's world begins with a signature, but creation began with a spark. The law of man cannot own what God already authored. And then in episode 195, they tell you act of God in insurance, but in truth, it's an act of nature, the only thing outside corporate jurisdiction. That's why they must redefine it. The body isn't property. Property is what the system makes when it reduces life to a title. The living have no title. The dead are titled. And then in episode 208, last two for now, freedom isn't doing what you want. It's remembering what you are. The fiction can never be free because it never lived. All belief systems are property systems. Ownership begins when truth gets notarized. What do you think of that?
Well, first of all, I'll start out with the Christian scriptures, and I'll let everybody know I'm not a Christian, but I was raised as one through various different sects of religion, whether it be Methodist, Presbyterian, Protestant, whatever. And the one I go to is Jeremiah 1:5. Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. Before thou camest forth from the mother's womb, I sanctified thee, and I ordained thee a prophet unto the nations. This is the thing before the paperwork. And then when we subject ourselves to that record, as Curtis was telling us about, that fiction, the statistics, the enumeration through the Bureau of Vital Statistics, it's only vital for their record. The nature of our being is already. And so when we subject ourselves to the material realm in that paperwork, that's at Romans 13, wherein those commandments are supposed to be followed in order for those paperwork, that paperwork system to operate correctly. And when it comes to that insurance, isn't that he who hateth suretyship is sure? You know,
do you hear some people talking in the background?
Yeah, but it's not you because you were muted.
I think that was my companion talking to my dog.
Okay, that's okay. I'm muting myself because obviously I'm extremely noisy. I think you guys can actually hear the voices in my head.
You both have been very naughty, but
I wish I could.
well, that would be fun. I'm going to just say something. I tried to write down some of the stuff you said, Rose. The only thing that I really remember was the idea of the act of God. Fertilization. Let's just be really clear. I'm going to stick with the fundamentals all night because that's what's going to jump out at me tonight. Fertilization, the moment of creation, when sperm fertilizes ovum, when dad's sperm, that's one bloodline, fertilizes mom's ovum, another bloodline. They're two vines. They're two vines. So it's divine. Divinity is the product of dad's bloodline and my mom's bloodline combined. That's divinity. And the product of that divinity is the single cell zygote. That's a kingdom. That's my monarchy. And there's no middleman. There's no middleman between the moment of creation and the creator. There's no middleman. There's no man involved with that creation ever. So in other words, there's just me and the creator. And from that moment to this moment, it's one faultless lifetime. Here's the problem, that acts of nature, acts of God are uninsurable. They're not insurable. And so what you got to realize is that if you get all the way back to fertilization, and my tagline is, all present and accounted for from fertilization to last breath. When you recognize your origin as fertilization, which is an act of God, you're outside of insurance, their public policy. You're outside of the public policy. You're not forced, and here it is, you're not forced to comply. Compliance is an insurance term. So when they're telling you, to comply, it's because they want you to admit to be the insurable character born to the Gregorian calendar civil timeline. So the birth date is a character that is insurable. It's a franchise that is insurable, but the man that was created at fertilization is not insurable. Compliance does not apply to the living man. Compliance applies to the insured character. They're not even in the same worlds.
Right.
They're not in the same worlds.
Yeah. 20 CFR 422.103 tells us that the individual's name and social security number identify the record. Now, in logic and reason, you take a look at your driver's license and you will see it has a name and a number, and that too would be the name and driver's license number identifies the driver record. Your name and address identify the individual's name and address identify the resident record. It's just a record. That's where the liability sits. And as long as you keep connecting yourself with it, they're going to connect the liability to you.
It's a record, but let me pronounce it a different way. It's a record. You're recording yourself to mother through the infancy. So now, if you're an infant, if you're looked at as a legal infant through that record, that record, then infants lack legal capacity. So because you lack legal capacity as a minor, somebody has to speak for you. This is where the Bar Association comes in. But it comes in because you've already confessed to being, in reality, a lunatic, insane, by claiming to be an infant. Every time you use the birth date, you are looked at or received as an infant. I call it a mental midget, but it seems to, piss people off. The point is that 65 years later, here I sit. I am nowhere near infancy. But the birth record, the word record, go to it right now at Webster's and look it up. If you just scroll down far enough, it says an incomplete statistic, an unsurpassed statistic, meaning you never get beyond the infancy, ever. The record doesn't go beyond infancy. And yet I've had 65 years outside of the womb beyond infancy.
Okay, Keith, were you able to finish your thoughts about the record and residency, or can I read more quotes? So I know what
I'm good. I don't think it needs to be expanded anymore. I think Kurt filled it in pretty good.
I'm going to say one thing about Keith. Here's the most amazing thing. Everything that I've discovered along the way, I took giant leaps. I saw connections that are way ahead, and I kept following those leaps. What he does right now, what he's doing is he's filling in the gaps. He fills in the gaps where I leapt from stone to stone to stone. All of the stuff he talks about as far as the details, they fill in the holes. They fill in the gaps. I don't talk about that anymore. I'm macro.
Interestingly enough, I've been telling my platform that I'm changing my platform. I'm done with that shit.
Good. We need to talk more often. Anyway, I'm going to be quiet for that.
Well, that's why I'm trying to go in chronological order, because it's been so many years that I'm looking for quotes, and I can tell that we're going to zero in on things more as we get closer to quotes from episode 477. So I'm skipping over the really short ones because they're so general. So now I'm just going to read a couple longer ones as we've warmed up the audience, because I always want to think about the people, because we know we're going to have all the big fans show up who already have been listening to your podcast and these shows and our talks. But I really want every single one of our conversations to also reach out to the people who don't know what the heck we're talking about or where we're coming from. So both of you mute yourself, and here we go. So this is from April 19th of 2019. When you accept the birth certificate as your beginning, you accept the lie that life starts at registration. But registration is not creation. It's a man-made record meant to replace what already existed. The true beginnings of man is the divine act of fertilization. That spark where two living elements combine and something entirely new begins to exist. That's not paperwork, that's creation. Everything after that is administration of property. A living man is complete the moment his zygote forms. That's the whole man. Every document and ceremony that comes after that point exists to separate him from that origin, to make the creation of God into an artifact of the state. So then on June 18th, he said, you can't be both the creation and the creator of the same thing. I think I already read this one. Sorry. Okay, so we're identifying a break, a separation that is being used against the living man to sever him from his true origin. The godly act of creation is the fertilization itself. That act creates the zygote, the first and complete instance of man. If you abandon that first cause, you have neither God nor man. You've lost both. Rights disappear the moment you abandon that origin, because rights exist only in the living, not in the paperwork that follows. So the unbroken package, the fertilized ovum, is God's creation. The moment that package is broken, jurisdiction changes. Once the cord is cut and the child is treated as separate from his original material, church and state are divided. That act becomes the legal foundation for ownership, taxation, and control. The law calls it birth. Kurt calls it a avulsion, the cutting away of divine property. They take a piece of paper, rub it on the child's biological material, and call it an heirloom. That paper becomes the stand-in for the living estate. From that moment forward, the living heir is replaced by a record, and the record is what the system governs. Man forgets himself, and the record becomes his new name. So I'm going to stop there and ask you guys, we just talked about the record. Is that a good sum up of what we discussed, or is there anything to add after hearing those quotes before I were to continue?
No, I think that's pretty solid.
Kurt, anything to add, or do you want me to move on?
No, I got two things. I'm picking out individual or separate words, little words, ideas that will actually explain a lot of those really hard quotes.
Excellent. Go for it. That's why we're doing this. Go for it.
So when baby comes out, and remember baby's kingdom, baby's monarchy is all of baby's 46 chromosome biology. The baby, the umbilical cord, and the extra embryonic material. It's all one 46 chromosome kingdom. When they clamp and cut the cord, they create a false duality, like two positions. So baby's out on the land, but the rest, residue, and remainder of baby's kingdom, estate, is still inside mom in the waters. So you got some of baby in the water, or some of the kingdom in the water, and baby on the land. The cut creates two separate states of existence. The state of the unborn in the water and the state of the born on the land. The space that the cut creates, the space between in the water and on the land, is between those two states of existence. It's called interstate. And that's where interstate commerce occurs. It occurs in the fictitious space that they created when they cut the umbilical cord. Now, the thing about the law is that the law only recognizes the water as one place and the land as another place. That's you're either in the water or on the land. But when they cut the cord, they create a space that doesn't exist in reality. And that space, that interstate space, would be like the shoreline between the water and the land. Again, the legal world only recognizes, are you in the water or are you on the land? But the shoreline, think about this, at high tide, where the water meets the land, there's just water and land. But at low tide, you have the water over there, the land over there, and this weird piece of ground that does not exist legally. That's the shoreline. Well, that shoreline is exactly what I'm talking about. It is the fictional realm where these courts are working. They're working on the shoreline that doesn't exist in law, between the water and the land. That's the shoreline. That's where the pirates work. And okay, so I'm going to leave that there because that explains some things. The word jurisdiction popped up. Jurisdiction's amazing, but it doesn't apply to me. What, Kurt? Jurisdiction doesn't apply to you? No, it doesn't. Let me explain something. I'm going to go, if I can, I'm using Debbie's computer, so it's a little harder than me being downstairs. I'm going to go to the word extraterritorial. E-X-T-E, extra, I'm sorry, I missed something here.
EXTR.
Yeah, E-X-T-R. T-E-R-R-I, I'm just going to, territorial, extraterritorial. Done. I'm going to Webster's because anybody can get there. So I'm going to Webster's extraterritorial, and then I'm going to explain what it is. Extraterritorial. Look at this. Again, I'm using Debbie's computer, so I'm completely unfamiliar with me.
I'm going to put it up on the screen so everyone's seeing what you're reading right now, just so you know, but keep reading.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Here it is, extraterritorial. It says existing or taking place outside the territorial limits of a jurisdiction. In other words, outside of all jurisdictions. Something that is extraterritorial is outside of everybody's jurisdiction. There is no court that can actually speak to something that is that is extraterritorial. Now, here's the point. In the womb, in the waters of mother, there is no jurisdiction. You're outside of time. You're in front of time because time doesn't actually begin until you enter the Gregorian calendar realm, which is the birth date. So you're in front of, you're prehistoric, you're prehistory in the womb, and everything, all that biology that begins at fertilization and is in that water for those 9 months, it's all extraterritorial. Well, guess what? If it's extraterritorial in the womb, it's extraterritorial out of the womb. When I come from my monozygotic maritime monarchy in the water onto the land, I'm still, my vessel, the body I'm using today, has the exact same 46 chromosomes as the original monarchy. So I, the living, right here at this computer, am extraterritorial based upon my origin. But I have to know my origin in order to be outside of their jurisdiction. If I'm claiming a birth date, that's not extraterritorial. That's within the jurisdiction of the Gregorian civil calendar. But if I know my true origin, which is God's origin, or which I would call an act of God, fertilization, that's extraterritorial because it's in the waters of mother. So once you learn the truth of the matter, all the way back to fertilization, your existence, your presence is extraterritorial. There's no court that can even call upon you.
Okay, thank you so much, Kurt. Keith, I don't know what you think about how people, if he just made it more confusing for people or not, but I think that these definitions make it a lot easier. Don't you think that this helps make it so much more sense?
Oh, definitely. And then to help correlate it, I don't know how many people in the audience are familiar with fishing and the laws there, but along the rivers, you have it's like an easement that you have around a regular parcel that provides for both the right of way as far as right of passage and right of portage, which would be water and land passage. And so if you're a fisherman fishing in the waters, the land jurisdiction wouldn't really apply to you, and the maritime jurisdiction wouldn't really apply to you because you're both on land and doing water activity. And that's pretty much the essence of what Kurt was saying there in regards to the paperwork and stuff. They're operating in a special zone that nobody really has jurisdiction because of the activity. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Anything you want to add to that, Kurt? Or shall I read more the next quote to get more specific?
Here's the thing. If my origin is extraterritorial, my present being is extraterritorial. I never enter a jurisdiction. They're saying I do because they created a character based upon biological material that was cut off of me and presumably forsaken, abandoned, deserted. But it's not true, because if I'm using it today, I never abandoned it. This is the key. If I'm still breathing, if I still have the breath of God, the Spirit of God in me today, I never died. I never abandoned it. And that's the problem, is I have to know my true origin in order to actually be looked at as extraterritorial.
That's what I want to impart to everyone, is that people don't realize the importance of knowing, because they always ask me, what do I do now? What do I do with this information? And I'm like, knowing it is the first step, and it's more powerful than you could ever comprehend.
I'm going to throw an example at you about what you just said, Rose, because of the knowledge, the word knowing. Knowledge is the most important thing. I have a guy in the PMA that years ago did something, based upon some knowledge that he got where I am. And what he did was the registration to renew the plate, the tag on the back of his car. He got a physical thing in the mail that said, listen, your plates are about to expire. What did he do? He wrote on it, and I don't know exactly, other than what I know, does not or has not the blood of Christ already paid for this. And I know what the blood of Christ is. I'm not going to explain it
Right.
tonight, but I'm just going to say that he wrote that on the renewal for both his car and his wife's, and he sent it back.
I remember when
And
that happened.
now here's what's weird. I was on a bike ride, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks, it hasn't been 3 weeks ago, but he called me. And he says, Kurt, remember when I did that? I said, yeah. He goes, well, I've been driving around on expired plates now for 3 years. I've had cops behind me, state troopers behind me. Nobody's ever stopped me. He says, here's what's interesting. He might even be listening tonight, but here's the thing. I'm going to say it. He says, I bought a new car recently, and the dealer he said, listen, your plates are expired. He goes, no, they're not, because they don't expire ever, if you know the truth of the matter. But anyway, so he's kind of going back and forth with the dealership, and they said, listen, we got to do something. So they created what do they call it? A temporary tag for the new car, for the car. He threw the temporary tag in the back seat, and he put his old plate that went to another car on his new car, and he drove away. So here's his story. He says, I got to tell you, I was driving down the road the other day, and I'm doing 80 in a 60. Now I think he's down in the Carolinas or down that direction. He says, I'm driving 80 in a 60, and I saw the trooper come down off of the overpass, and he started following me. And I'm kind of thinking to myself, he's got this tag that doesn't even belong on that car according to the registration. And he says, Kurt, this guy followed me for 10 miles. He said, I never slowed down. And then he says, about 10 miles out, another trooper gets in front of me. So now there's a trooper in front of me and a trooper behind me. He says the trooper in front of me slowed me down a bit, maybe to 75. But now the three of us are going 75 for the next 5 miles. And he says, finally, I get to my turnoff. I put on my blinker, I moved to the other lane, and then I turned off. And they just kept going. The point is that when you actually know the truth, Rose, Keith, seriously, this has nothing to do with anything that I know of other than the truth. They don't mess with you.
Listen,
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you think you know or the paperwork. It has to do with actually identifying reality and staying outside the jurisdiction of the bounty hunters.
Well, and this is another part of that reality, if you want to pull that back up.
yeah, but make sure you click the X or scroll. You see how it's covered?
Yeah.
Click the, okay, good. Sorry.
So this is 28 CFR 29.10, owner withdrawal from the program. And it's from the Department of Justice, Motor Vehicle Theft Prevention Act regulations. This is the only reason you need a registration sticker on it, for theft prevention, so they can track it down if it gets stolen. In one paragraph, 2 sentences, folks. An owner may withdraw from the program at any time by completely removing the program decal and changing the license plate if necessary. The owner is also encouraged to notify the participating agency in writing of such withdrawal. And the only reason that it's in that language is because it's voluntary.
I think that your friend with the blood, does not the blood of Christ pay for this? Someone got it and they didn't understand it. It just got kicked up to the boss, who got kicked up somewhere, and eventually it got into the hands of like a Jesuit, and they said, oh, this guy's awake and he knows what he's doing. Let me take care of it, and sends him the refund, because the blood of Christ, the cut material, the piece that was placed on deposit as equity, already paid the bill. And instead of arguing, he just asked that question. That allowed the fiduciaries on the other end to answer it as a fiduciary by applying the equity. And he didn't make a statement. He didn't make a claim. He asked a question. Does not the blood of Christ, he asked it in real time, does not the blood of Christ pay for this? And he got his answer, yes, you overpaid your money back.
Absolutely.
And in his own, in his own hand, in his own handwriting. And here's what's funny. The definition of equity. Rose, you brought this up. Thank God you did, because equity, you go to equity at Webster's Online, and what is the definition of equity? It says justice in accordance with natural law is equity. What happens when you claim a fictitious beginning rather than your natural law beginning? You don't have any equity. You lose the equity if you forsake it. If you've forsaken the blood of Christ, i.e. your own amnion, known as the lamb, look up amnion, look up the etymology of the word, and it says lamb. That lamb, that membrane, is the Lamb of God. And it's already on deposit because of the cut. And people don't understand that if you abandon that origin, you abandon your equity. Equity is justice in accordance with natural law. You've got to align yourself with nature. You have to align yourself with nature in order to be within that extraterritorial jurisdiction. You know the cop behind my buddy. They called it in and they said, no, let him go. Don't even bother with him. He's extraterritorial. He's beyond our reach.
Okay, let me get through these quotes because I love how it's sparking new conversation. Unless, Keith, is there anything else you want to add before I continue?
No, I think he's covering everything I missed.
All right. So, mom and dad don't create life. They deliver the building materials. The act of fertilization, that spark when two become one, is the true genesis. It's the origin that science can observe and faith recognizes as divine. To confuse that act with the latter event called birth is to substitute paperwork for creation. The entire system depends on that confusion. When the umbilical cord is cut, that's called an avulsion, a forced separation of you from the rest of your estate. That severed material is evidence of your divine origin. And by cutting it and registering a new narrative, man trades Genesis for fiction. He's now treated as property of the world instead of evidence of the creation. So science proves there's only one estate, and that's the zygote. The placenta, the cord, and the child are all one being. And the system depends on convincing you there are two. So that's why it's so, sorry, that I'm interrupting here, but that's why it's so important, the knowing. So back to the quote, that something can be separated and owned, but creation knows no division. One life, one estate, one origin. And so when we fast forward like 2 years, I'm skipping the whole area of COVID when you were writing back and forth with the president and making him start calling himself the fertilization president, episode 402 from May of 22, people confuse conception with fertilization. And that confusion is the root of every legal and spiritual deception. Fertilization is creation. The moment two become one and the new estate appears that has never existed before. Conception, as used in law, is implantation into the wall of the uterus, which is already days after creation. The law moved the origin from fertilization to conception so they could claim ownership of the product by redefining where you began. They recreated you as property. I'm almost done, guys. A zygote isn't potential life. It is life. It's the whole estate. The placenta, the cord, the body are all one continuous man. The cut that comes later is administrative, not biological. So every separation that follows, church from state, public from private, citizen from man, imitates that first cut. So you don't need to fix what was never broken. Fertilization was perfect. The system's entire authority depends on convincing you again that you were born incomplete and that you need their paperwork to be made whole. The truth is you were whole before they ever wrote your name. Period. That's what I was going to read for now, and then see what you guys wanted to say about that.
Okay. Can I jump in?
Yeah, it's your turn. Go ahead.
No. Okay, so here you started off talking about mom and dad. I always define, I speak of my dad as something different than the father for a reason. My dad, Richard, greatest dad ever, and there's no doubt he died right around 2019. Greatest dad ever. I differentiate my dad because my dad gave me 23 chromosomes in his sperm. But the father is not my dad. The father is the product of mom and dad's divinity. And the product of their divinity is the zygote. If I go to father at Etymology Online, it actually says the father, and I'm going to Etymology Online right now to father, lowercase f. It says any lineal male ancestor, but it says the supreme being. By the way, if you see the avatar I sent you guys for this call, it's me and my son, Alex. So there's the impetus behind everything I'm doing. I don't want my son to have to experience the world that my dad suffered. I want my son to be part of my kingdom and everything that means. But look at father at Etymology Online says the supreme being. But here's something even more important. Go down about 2 or 3 paragraphs. And it says something that makes all the sense in the world. The zygote. So through through evolutionary due process from a single cell to the embryo, to the fetus, to the baby, to the man I am today. That's all evolutionary due process. Don't argue with me about evolution because you don't know a fucking thing about it. But here's the thing. From the single cell zygote, the offspring of the zygote's the father. The monarch. The zygote is the monarchy. It's the monarch. It's the father of the offspring. The offspring is the embryo, fetus, baby. So the baby comes from the zygote. The baby does not come from my dad. So here's the thing. The definition of father, about 3 paragraphs down, says anything that gives rise to something else. The zygote gives rise to the embryo, fetus, baby. What's interesting is that the zygote's 46 chromosomes and the baby's 46 chromosomes are identical, which is why when you go to John 10:30 at King James, it says, I and my father are one. It's because the father's the zygote. It is not my dad. So when they clamp and cut the cord and they let that material die, that father becomes heavenly father. Only attainable, you can only get to the Father through consciousness, through the ascension, the conscious ascension of this knowledge. You have to know the zygote is the Father. You have to know it. And then you talked about the word avulsion. My biology in the placenta, the fetal part of the placenta is my biology. And avulsion is actually my biology deposited on a piece of mom, which is known as an accretion. So here's the thing. When I'm floating in the waters of mother, unattached to everything, eventually around day 7, I plant into the uterine wall. Mom, right after creation, the moment of creation, fertilization starts to do something to the uterine wall. She's preparing a landing strip. She's preparing a piece of ground for me to come out of the heavens and land. That piece of ground that she's preparing is called an accretion. And here's the thing. When all of that material comes out as the afterbirth, a piece of me is on the accretion. My avulsed biology is on mom's accretion, this piece of ground that she prepared for me. The fetal maternal placenta is my boat on mom's island. You got to look at it that way. Now, here's what's interesting about this. The word conception is not creation. It's the implantation process. So the product of conception, which is known as born alive, the born alive product of conception, the only thing produced or created as I implanted was the uterine wall accretion, the piece of ground underneath my boat. That's what was created through conception. I already existed. I existed from fertilization, but the thing that's created is the conception. The product of conception is this piece of ground that mom created on her own, without the help of dad, without the help of dad's sperm. So this conceived material is an immaculate conception because it wasn't involved in a sexual process. It wasn't involved with my dad. It's virgin territory. It's a virgin land. It is literally the Virgin Mary. So now the piece of ground under me is a virgin island. And my boat is on that virgin island. Here's what's funny. People go, what are you talking about? I'm saying that mom created this piece of the placenta without any help from anyone else. There was no father involved. My mom did that on her own, so it's an immaculate creation, an immaculate conception without a male. And so the maternal part of the placenta evidences the immaculate conception, the virgin land upon which I arrived. So the fetal maternal placenta evidences my biology on this virgin territory. And here's what's really weird is that Mary, the Virgin Mary, back in the early 1850s, the Virgin Mary was brought in to the United States and became the patroness of the United States. So the land, just prior to the Civil War, which is a whole nother topic, a whole nother night. But before the Civil War, the Roman Catholic Church brought in the Virgin Mary as the patroness of the United States. And all you have to do is go to the word patron or patron or patroness, or go find out what it means for the Virgin Mary to be the patroness. It means that that's the land. That's the promised land. And the funny thing is we all abandon it. We all forsake the promised land, which is the fetal maternal placenta. We all walk away from the promised land by claiming a birth date. We have deserted the promised land by our claim to a birth certificated character. That's it. That's how it all works. The birth certificate is a piece of paper. It does all that stuff. But the reality is it means absolutely nothing to me. The birth certificate is a land warrant to the Virgin Territory. It's a land warrant. And remember that a piece of me is on that land. Some of my blood has been spilled onto that land. And when I finally get it, when I finally understand that my blood is on that island, is on that land, all I have to do is say, my blood, the body and blood, has already paid. And what that, because that bounty land, that virgin land, that promised land becomes mine. It is now taken out of the public. It's removed from the public and given to me as private land. That is what most people wish they could understand. It's taken out of the public. It's no longer subject to the public policy, subject to public law, subject to the common. Remember, the public is common. What you want to do is you want to get your biology out of the public and back in under your control into the private. And that's the bounty land that nobody even knows exists, but probably except for me and the people controlling it. But the point is it's a bounty. It's a bounty that is mine at this point. It's my land. It's no longer in the public. It's not subject to the common law, the common man. I'm not common. I'm unique. And so is my biology, and so is my Virgin Islands, and so is my existence from fertilization to last breath. It's all private. One last thing about that is that when people don't understand that the zygote, the moment of creation, the product of that creation is the zygote, that's my personality. That's my person. So I exist personally from fertilization to last breath. It's all personal. Everything is personal to me if I know that my kingdom, my monarchy begins at fertilization. It's personal. And if it's personal, it can't be business. If it's all personal, it can't be business. And so my life goes from the public life, from public rule, from public law and all that garbage right back into the private because I have earned it. If you want to go to the Liber Code at Article 31, it'll explain all this. But I have now, I should just go there, but I've conquered that infancy. I've conquered that land with my knowledge, with what I've learned over the last 17 years. That is my ground, and it's in the private now. People always ask, how do you get out of the matrix? I'm not in it. I'm not in it. You guys are all in it, but I'm not in it.
Wasn't there something that happened in 1819 when they created the bounty for the delivery? And isn't it time for you to talk about the movie Trading Places, where the character wakes up from his nightmare with Dan Aykroyd and he's laying there and he sees Billy Ray Valentine and what was the thing about trading spaces at the end?
The best movie, yeah, the best part, the very end of the movie is when the legal fiction and the living man are reunited. They're now the United States again. The two states are united. The person of color and the U.S. vessel, they're united. And what's interesting about that unification is at the end of the movie, you see a boat with a mooring line. You got to think of it as the umbilical cord. You have a vessel, a boat with the umbilical cord going down beneath the surface of the water and clearly anchored or connected to the continent of that island. And on the island, you have the Eddie Murphy character, the black man, i.e. person of color, sitting on the island. But the ship out there that is moored to that island, you have the Dan Aykroyd character wearing a vestment that is red, white, and blue. So you got the boat moored to the island. So now you have the fetal, maternal, you have the baby, the umbilical cord, and the extra embryonic material all in that scene. The baby is the vessel, the boat, the umbilical cord is the mooring line, and the island is the extra embryonic material. And it's all in the last scene. And that is when they're wealthy. They have defeated the system when they're reunited, when they're the United States. Right now, there is no United States. Everything is divided. It's divide and conquer. They cut the umbilical cord. They separated everything. But when you finally wrap your head around all present and accounted for from fertilization to last breath as one maritime, monozygotic maritime monarchy, when you understand that it's all waterborne, land-based, waterborne, land-based. So when I hear people screaming about Admiralty law, the gold fringe flag, I laugh because I want it to be Admiralty. I want that because that's my kingdom being recognized. Everybody's running from their own ownership.
Okay, so I have just 3 more sections from episode 477 to read, and then we'll have you guys talk about anything you want, any final thoughts. But this will be these are the final quotes that I was hoping would at least give people a foundation for understanding and beginning to think about what is being presented here. So, from fertilization to your last breath is one biological experience. When they cut the umbilical cord, they create the false duality, a piece of you left behind that they treat as unborn and stuck in the past. That becomes the foundation of jurisdiction, the separation between church and state, but there's only one living biology. And then I might mess up how to pronounce this, but fictio sedit veritati, fiction yields to truth. Once you know you began at fertilization, you are already free. The trick was never to change your status, but to remember what it already is. If you are whole from the start, there's no decedent estate, no administration, no need for a prescription. The truth itself is the cure. The umbilical cord is the evidence of right of way. It's proof that you had passage through your mother's property into the world. When that cord is cut and claimed, they register the passage as theirs. The entire legal world is built on the idea that you needed a license to cross over your mother's biology. That's all I've got. That is what I think is so important for people to know.
Keith, you want me to do this?
Well, before you do, I just wanted to throw, and I know you're a scripture lover, so I know you'll follow this, and I hope the audience does, because in a way, the scripture tells us this stuff without really having to dig into all this, the zygote and the U.S. code and everything, and that's why I love it too. Even though I'm not a Christian anymore, I understand the moral and ethical foundations that it's laying out for a guide. So it starts out with the Jeremiah 1:5 that I mentioned earlier. Before I formed thee in the belly, before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. Before thou was cast from the womb, I sanctified thee, and I ordained thee a prophet unto the nations. So we're above the nations. And in Psalms 121, verse 8, it says, the Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth and even forevermore. And then it goes on in Leviticus 25, verse 23 through 25. The land shall not be sold forever, for it is mine, and ye are strangers and sojourners with me. That circulars the first two verses that I just read. Then it goes on and says, in all of the lands of your possession, ye shall grant a redemption to the land. If you come across a brother that is waxen and poor and has sold off his belongings, and he asks his brethren to redeem him, ye shall redeem him. That's the power of being a sojourner with God and not succumbing to the bifurcation of that false patriarch. Then it goes on to say in Isaiah 54:17, no weapon that is formed against thee shall prosper, and every tongue that shall rise against thee in judgment thou shalt condemn. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, and their righteousness is of me, saith the Lord. That's what they're speaking about with the truth. You don't let any false tongues rise against you. In order to do that, you have to learn those tongues, the languages and stuff. Then to finalize it, Romans 13:8 says, owe no man anything but to love one another. For he that loveth another hath fulfilled the law. And that's that blood and body of Christ is already paid for it. So why are you accusing me of owing anything?
It's interesting that the PMA I created is called the Society of the Sojourner. And nice. PMA in my world, in this society, private member association, the member itself, the member, if you go to online dictionary, look up member, it means the organ or the limb. That's the cut material. So for this society, the member equals the material that has been violently removed at the port of entry. To remember it, to have knowledge of it, it's called sound mind and memory, or mind and memory. When you have a mind and memory about that material, that member, that membership, then that's your equity. That's you not fleeing from that ground. Anyway, so I think the cool thing, well, the easiest way I've ever been able to figure out how to explain this to people is that you got to think of your life like a rope. My rope is 65 each. Let's think of it this way. Each foot of the rope equals 1 year. Remember, 12 inches to a foot, 12 months. Don't argue with me on this. I'm just using it as an example. 12 inches to a foot, 12 months to a year. So each foot equals 1 year. So in my situation, we would say that I've been outside the womb for 65 feet of rope, 65 years. But remember that inside the womb in the water, I was there for 9 months, which is 9 inches. So my entire rope from alpha to omega, from beginning to end, from fertilization to last breath, is 65 feet, 9 inches. That's my entire lifetime. If you can view a rope that way. Now, here's what's interesting. In their world, what did they do? They cut the first 9 inches of rope off. When I was coming out, when I came out of mom, they cut off the first 9 inches, the first 9 months, and they retained it like a retainer. They retained it as a deposit or deposition, securing my equity in the world that existed before me. They secured it with that deposit. Now, if I abandon the deposit, if I abandon that bank account, remember that when I land in a uterine wall, I'm landing in the bank of the river. When I abandon my bank account, I have no equity. So here's my rope, 65 feet, 9 inches long. It's unbroken, uncut, and the rope exists as one rope, one lifetime. Why is that important? Because at no point is any piece of my rope not present. If the rope that I'm using today is present, then the rope on the other end is present. Hey, Keith, when you were sitting for your 5th grade class picture, what day was it? What day was it when you were sitting for your 5th grade class picture?
Today.
It was today. So this is so easy to understand, is when mom and dad lay together, when dad's sperm fertilized mom's ovum, what day was it when that happened?
Today.
It was today. All there is for us in our lifetime as one unbroken lifetime is today, the present. So my rope, my 65 feet, 9 inches of rope is the present. There's no piece of my rope in the past. But when they clamp and cut the first 9 inches of that off, the first 9 months off, they enter it into a record, which is frozen in time. And now that moment doesn't come with me in the present. It's frozen. So September 19th, 1960 at 3:50 a.m. has become part of the historical record. It's in the past. But that's not reality, because I've never been there. I've never been in the past. And when people understand that what they've done is they've created a jurisdiction based upon a calendar that allows for the past and the present, that's your bifurcation, Keith. That's what you call the bifurcation. But the reality is that I've never been there. So what did they do? They created a record that would be considered a stargate that allows you to move between the past and the present. And that record is the birth certificate. So you got this birth certificate frozen in time, and you have you in the present. But once they bring the record into play, that's a historical document. It's history. I've never been there. So then they require somebody to cross over. And that's the Bar Association. The Bar Association is working between the past and the present, or the living and the dead. But it's not true. That's my point. It's not true. When you understand the rope is unbroken, the rope is uncut, my lifetime goes from fertilization to this moment, then there is no history. There is no past. I've never been there. My rope, every piece of it, every inch of it, from fertilization to last breath, is fully present, wholly present. And that's the Supreme Being. When you finally get there, you'll understand that the Supreme Being is extraterritorial. There's no jurisdiction for the living. There is none.
It's biological sovereignty. It's basically modern individuals unknowingly operate whatever you want to call the legal fiction, whether it's a person or a citizen or a name. But I remember you were discussing the idea that it would serve as a flag of convenience for the governments and corporate systems. The idea of the flag of convenience.
The flag of convenience is the word it's convenient. If you look up the word, by the way, Harry Truman back in the 1940s, he was there when they changed over into a theocracy by 1948 or 49. It became a theocracy. But the word convenience, Harry S. Truman, and the S period is very important because he said that for convenience and consistency, right, that the author must use a period for the initial. Now, I know what all that means, and that's for a whole nother call. But my point is that he used the word convenience. Why? Look up convenience at Webster's. You don't have to go to any special dictionary. You go to Webster's, and what is convenience? If you scroll down a little bit, it says free or ease, EASE, ease. And what does that mean? If it's ease, it's not dis-ease. So convenience actually, it overrides dis-ease because convenience is about ease. So here's what's interesting is when they clamp, hang on. When they clamp and cut the cord, they create a dis-eased position, a dis-eased character that needs remedy. It needs to be remedied. But when you're whole, you don't need that that administrative process. You don't need remedy if you're already healthy, if you're already whole. My point is that convenience, the word convenience means ease. So when you understand that dis-ease is contrary to ease, the word convenience actually starts to make more sense.
And so does spell of illness.
The spell of illness could be the very spelling of a name or the spelling itself that evidences an illness that requires a remedy. But you don't need a remedy. At Luke 5:31 in King James, Luke 5:31 in Jesus' own voice, what does he say? They that are whole, W-H-O-L-E, they that are whole need not a physician. You do not need the administrative process if you're already whole from fertilization to last breath.
I just wanted to point out that I find it amusing that under number 4, where freedom from discomfort, ease, under convenience, the example they give is the forms can be filled out online for your convenience. It's the only example under the definition that uses forms and as part of this words definition. And then under that, Keith, you were talking about the spell of illness, and then under that, designed for quick and easy preparation or use, convenience foods. So there's the other thing that's killing us. Two sides of the
convenient. Okay, but think about the word food. Think about, when you go and you eat the body and drink the blood, that's considered food. That's the cure to what ails you. That makes you whole again. When they're offering you through this Eucharistic element or Eucharistic idea, they're saying you need to come to us to be made whole again. Jesus, in his own words, says, no, you're already whole. You don't need me if you're whole. So the idea is they're getting you to crawl on your hands and knees, beg, pray, whatever words you want to use, when you don't need to do it.
Well, yeah, and under that spell of illness, it specifically says it's an inpatient hospital services beginning the first day. That inpatient, patient literally means to suffer. So in suffering.
And the patient exists because of the cut. If all of you would have been delivered, the definition of delivery is a fetus and its membranes. But when they clamp and cut the cord and don't deliver the membranes, have you been delivered? No, you haven't been delivered. So everything that's happening in the hospital from the moment of the clamping and cutting of the umbilical cord is an abortion. And when I wrote that to the president, when the president received that letter, March of 2020, he shut down the ecumenical economy, the global economy. They called it COVID. What is COVID? C-O-V-I-D. C-O-V means covered or insured. I-D is Freud's id, ego, and superego. The id is the infancy. So the covered infant or the insured infant is COVID. So did I start COVID? Probably.
I just want you to know that this, for a very, very long time, I've had your website, supremebeing.life, on the screen. And this is where people can sign up to be part of your private member association. And there's so much great information on this website and links to the P.I.G.S.C.U.N.T.S archives that I was talking about earlier, and the books as well, which I'm going to update in my playlist. But I want to read the very top paragraph. Similar to the metamorphosis of an earthbound caterpillar becoming a free-flying butterfly, man's unique first-in-time genesis and faultless right-of-way evolutionary due process from a non-reducible single-celled zygote in the womb to a mature, non-reducible, thoroughly inspired, enlightened, and self-governing man beyond the womb may be a mysterious thing to the unlearned, huddled masses. But truth be told, such a thing occurs each and every day within the faultless laws of nature and nature's God.
That's a pretty good paragraph, isn't it?
I know. I'm just going to do one more. When a change of government takes place from a monarchical to a republican government, the old form is dissolved. Those who live under it and did not choose to become members of the new had a right to refuse their allegiance to it and to retire elsewhere. By being part of the society subject to the old government, they had not entered into any engagement to become subject to any new form the majority might think proper to adopt. That the majority shall prevail is a rule posterior to the formation of government and the results from it. It's not a rule binding upon mankind in their natural state. There, every man is independent of all laws except those prescribed by nature, and that's the Cruden versus Neal to North Carolina 338.
Absolutely. I used that in my last court case because of Kurt.
Listen, you know what's really weird? This is the quote that's on the back of the third book. And here's why. All I ever talk about from this point forward, and believe me, I can pretty much talk on anything if I had to, but the only thing that matters is this last line. First of all, people go, when a change of government takes place from a monarchical to a Republican government, most patriots are going to go, yeah, the Republican government. That republic is a maritime republic. And what people don't realize is that republic, that the constitution of that republic is not my constitution. My constitution as a living being, a supreme being, is mind, body, and spirit. I'm constituted of mind, body, and spirit. The constitution of that maritime republic is a piece of paper written in 1789. And that government isn't even my government. My government is upon my own shoulders, Isaiah 9:6. My point is that it says when a change of government takes place from a monarchical to a republican, that's the cut. That's them taking something from you and placing it on deposit, a minor account, a minor piece of you. But it's not true in my case because I have retained the monarchy. That's why they're talking about no kings. When that shit popped up as soon as my third book came out. When this book came out, where I'm actually defining myself as the monarch or as the being with the diplomatic genes connected to the original monarch, what did they start doing? That's right when the no kings bullshit came out. So they're trying everything they can do to stop reality from happening. And every time I do something, they try to counter it on a global scale. I'm not even joking. I know there's people listening to this call right now saying that guy is insane. I'm the only sane person I know.
Guaranteed. But what about what happened in South Korea?
I don't know.
I 9 months in the womb because of you.
Okay, so let me finish with this last line because you read it. It's the greatest line ever written. It says, there, every man is independent of all laws. There, and it's coming from the line before that where it says, it's a not rule binding upon mankind in their natural state. So there means natural state. In man's natural state, every man is independent of all laws. It doesn't say some laws. It doesn't say most laws. It says all laws. Every man is independent of all laws in his natural state. And here's what it says, except those prescribed by nature. When does man's nature begin? It begins at fertilization. So as long as you're aligned with nature, not only do you have equity, because equity is justice according to natural law, but this line says he's independent of all laws, all man-made bullshit, except those prescribed by nature, and nature begins at fertilization. When you align with nature, you're extraterritorial. You're outside of all jurisdictions. It's that simple. All the rest of the shit is a waste of time. No offense to anybody, but I let go of all my beliefs a long time ago. And I got 4 books sitting in front of me right now. The Sea Around Us, The Human Shore, The Enemy of All, and The History of Piracy. Because this is all about piracy. It's not the definition of war in Webster's is competition over a particular end. The particular end is the cut end. If there is no cut, there is no war. Now, here's what's interesting, and Keith, back me up on this. Letters of marque and reprisal is what we're dealing with in the admiralty courts. When you see a gold fringed flag, it's because of letters of marque and reprisal. The police out there, the cops out there can stop you because letters of marque and reprisal are in play. And letters of marque and reprisal can only be in play if there's a war. What happens when you take the war off the table? What happens when you get in front of the cut or you remove the idea of the cut, which means you're not at war. You're a pacifist or whatever. You're neutral. Then the letters of marque and reprisal are not in play. And if they're not in play, if a cop were to stop you when he doesn't have a letter of marque and reprisal, he's acting as a pirate. Well, that's what happens in my case. Everything from this point forward, if anybody acts against my maritime vessel, it's piracy. If they act against you guys out there, it's not, because they have letters of marque and reprisal, because right now you're at war because there's a cut end that has been abandoned. The cut end is the particular end. Look it up. To be at war in Webster's. Competition over a particular end. The particular end is the cut end. If you get rid of the cut, you get rid of the particular end. There is no war. Letters of marque and reprisal do not apply, which means every act against me is an act of piracy.
And against that natural state of being. And then one of my favorite definitions, in this state, and almost every state will have a specific definition of in this state. And for one of them, it says, in this state means at a physical location within Vermont for a transaction requested in person. So it gives us various elements there that define what in this state means. And it's a physical location in Vermont. And Vermont is a title, so it's in a record. And it's of a person. The individual's name and number identify the record.
And it doesn't exist because if you have surpassed that record. Remember, a record by definition is an unsurpassed statistic. Look at the word statistic. Statistic.
Yes, statist, I see. Statist, I see.
So there it is. So what's funny is that when you surpass the infancy, which is the infant record, you only surpass it by mentally ascending, by consciously ascending beyond the infant. Remember that the representation. You have all these Christians, no offense to anybody, I'm not trying to offend anybody, but you have all these people saying, I was made in the image of God. The image of G-O-D is D-O-G. The mirror image of God is dog. So you are claiming to be the dog, where I stand before the mirror. I have the breath of God in me. I have God in me standing before the mirror, but the image in the mirror is the reflection or mirror image of G-O-D, which is D-O-G. So the image is the dog. Now, here's what's interesting about that. The dog is the birth certificated character, which represents the human remains left behind, devoid of breath. If the human remains that have been cut off of me has no breath, it's actually spiritually bankrupt. If you want to know what the bankruptcy is, it's the spiritual bankruptcy. The spiritual bankruptcy happens when they clamp and cut the cord and they cut a piece of you off, a piece of your biology off of you that dies without the breath of God. And it dies and is given a record. So the record actually reflects a spiritless, godless entity, the dog. So there you go. Keep claiming the birth certificated character and understand that it is spiritually bankrupt. It's devoid of God. It's godless. The birth certificated character is godless.
And this is kind of indicated the way I see it in Genesis 2:7, where it says, God formed man of the dust of the ground. Understand the language there, man of the dust of the ground. And when he breathed the breath of life into his nostrils, pay attention, man became a living soul. One is a noun, one is a verb phrase. So one is just a description. The other one is an actual action. This is imperative to understand when they say the simple saying, actions speak louder than words.
But he breathed. So the spirit, the breath itself is what gives life. And the representation that was cut off of you left to die, which is ultimately genocide, is devoid of that breath. It is literally devoid of God. It is godless. Here's another definition that I find to be extremely important is the word Genesis. If you go to Genesis,
really quick.
What's that?
After you say this, then I need a turn.
Okay, so I'm sorry. So Genesis, lowercase loop-tail G Genesis at Webster's says it's the origin or coming into being of something. Tangible, real, living. Whereas the capital G Genesis, it actually, the definition is the mainly narrative first book of canonical Jewish and Christian scriptures. So you got to even define the word Genesis so that it applies to a living being rather than somebody else's story in somebody else's book. Remember, as the author of your own life, author means about God, by the way, but if you're the author of your own life, then all the words are defined by you. You are not subject to the words of another if you're the author. You have to understand that you, everyone listening to this, are the author of their own life. And so the word person doesn't mean what they say it means. It means what you say it means, but you've got to recognize that you're the author of your own life. My story is not his story.
Yeah, that's study to shew thyself approved unto God, A workman needing not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. Their word isn't necessarily true. Make sure you know what is true for you.
Rose?
Oh, sorry, I was muted. So I remember we were talking about Harry S. Period Truman. We were calling that the initial period. And then the idea of the men of letters. There were these enlightened scholars. They formed their own International Republic of Letters. I know what you're talking about, because with your logo, you use Curtis R. Period Kallenbach, because that's where the Lanham Act comes in. And so I just want to go to that right now because it's so important. I always talk about, it's called the trade name, the trademark. It identifies my property all the way back to fertilization. If you go to the Lanham Act, it was right in 1946, right there with the Harry S. Period Truman and the UN measure. So I just want to read this. It says, civil enforcement of the Lanham Act, it says, set out the remedies that can be sought when a trademark is infringed. These provisions forbid the importation of goods. The definition of goods is unborn or animals. So in other words, the stuff that was left behind is unborn. The stuff still in mother's womb after the cut is considered unborn. So when you put the period after the R in your name, could you remind me how that relates to the continuous timeline, the uncut timeline? How is using that stylistic period a representation of the unbroken timeline that evidences our connection to the godly origin, which is fertilization? Did I fuck that up? Are you still there? Are you the one that's muted now, Kurt?
Oh, here I am. Sorry, I was talking to myself apparently. So here we go. Kurt, or Curtis, I should say, is sitting at this computer. Curtis is on this call. Curtis Richard. Richard is actually the infant biology that was cut off of me. That's the Christ material. That's the Christ Mass, Christmas. That's the Christ Mass. So Richard is the material that was in the womb, the waterborne material in the womb. So Curtis Richard would actually be me, the umbilical cord, and the extra embryonic material. Curtis Richard is all of my kingdom, my biological kingdom. So Curtis Richard. Now, the thing is that if you go to Black's Law and look up the Christian name, the Christian name can be reduced to a single letter. So you take the Christian, Richard, and you reduce it to a single letter, and you have the letter R. So you got the R, Curtis R. And that right there is all of my biology. The biology today, all the way back to fertilization. Now here's the funny thing. The period. The period, not only does it indicate a time or a separation in the sentence, the ending of a sentence, like a sentence, a prison sentence, but it's also a dot. And a dot, if you look up DOT, is a dowry. And what is the dowry? It's the accretion. It's mom's uterine wall. So now you have me, my fetal biology, mom's uterine wall biology, which is the avulsion accretion, which is the fetal maternal placenta. And now you have the entirety of my property, all of it. That's that. I have the bounty. I have the promised land. It's all there in Curtis R. Period. What is Kallenbach? Kallenbach is my father's legitimacy, or his, what do they call it? Industrial property. I have all patents, copyrights. I have all rights to that because I'm legitimate. I've evidenced my legitimacy. So now I everything in the Kallenbach name for me belongs to me. I have access to it. There's no patent or trademark infringement. It's all mine. And by the way, I was going to go to the Lanham Act real quick because there's only one thing that to me is important. I'm going to Lanham Act at Wiki because I want to see I'm going to use one word when I find it here.
I know I didn't do a good job of describing the Lanham Act, so you're gonna fill in the gaps right now.
Here it is. Here it is. It just says the Lanham Act is subsection 43A, leads you to 15 U.S.C. 1125. 15 U.S.C. subsection 1125. False designations of origin. False descriptions and dilution forbidden. False designation of origin. My origin is the zygote. It is not the birth date, the Gregorian calendar character. So a false designation of origin is the birth date. When I go all the way back to fertilization, the Lanham Act is working for me. When I claim the birth date, the Lanham Act is working against me.
Absolutely. That's what I was mentioning about the journal. And then when you go to the hospital, ladies, gentlemen, you end up handing documents over to what's known as a birth clerk. And what they do is they take that information, mom being the informant, and they abstract it. And that's where the bifurcation happens. That's where they create the manual record that takes over the spiritual cord.
I love it.
We have a question for someone in chat, and this applies. My grandfather didn't have a middle name. He used to make a joke that he couldn't afford it. I wonder if it really was just a joke and he did have a middle name. But for someone who doesn't have a middle name, any comments?
Yes, they put a letter in there. It's the X. They put an X in there. Actually, if I go to, let me see if I can find it real quick. I might have to take the headset off. Sorry, and I'm going to have to, because I'm running out of juice again. I'm at 17%. But I'm going to go to Mark, M-A-R-K, like the mark of the beast. But I'm going to go to Mark at Black's Law, M-A-R-K. Mark, where is it? Got to get there fast. This is amazing. Mark, look at this. Mark, a character, usually in the form of a cross. Okay, a cross, it looks like, a lot of people will see the upright cross, but an X is also known as a cross. It's a St. Andrew's cross. So an X is a cross. So look what it says. A character, usually in the form of a cross, made as a substitute for his signature by a person who cannot write in executing a conveyance, will, or other legal document. Here it is. It is commonly made as follows. It is commonly made as follows. A third person writes the name of the marksman, leaving a blank space between the Christian name and the surname. There it is right there, a blank space. There's the guy that doesn't have a middle name. And it says, in the space, the latter traces the mark. An X. They put an X in the space between first and last. They do it. Hell, you sign next to the X every time you sign a receipt at the restaurant. There's an X signed next to the X. An attorney will race and put an X down on a piece of paper when you're in the courtroom so you can sign next to the cross. What does that mean? It means you're signing for the sacrifice. You become the sacrifice hanging on that cross. Your amnion, your Lamb of God, is now becoming the surety for that X, for that cross. But there is no person that doesn't have a middle initial or middle name, because they put the X in there for you.
And being so they do that, that's one of those lessons I learned while I was going through my last court case, Curtis, with the language and the grammar changes and everything. I thought, fuck it, I'm just not going to sign anything. So I didn't sign anything.
Remember, you can't sign anything.
Right. So that was my lesson. I went through the whole thing, not signing anything, refusing to, because all my life I had been indoctrinated to. So most people think I lost the case because I ended up with jail time. But I'll tell you, the experience ends like this. I did 47 days, getting 13 days of good time on a 60-day sentence, where it was a fifth offense possession, and all previous possession charges, I had an attorney, and I got max penalties, 2 years, all the fines and everything, probation, all that. And this time I got 60 days. They told me fines. They told me I had to do a drug eval, and they told me I had to get a DNA sample. But refusing to sign, the judge gave a discharge order. And when I went to be released, the lady across the counter handed me a paper, said, release paperwork. I said, nope, I'm not signing it. She says, well, you have to sign it or we can't let you out. I said, really? So I pulled out the judge's discharge order, looked at her, showed it to her, said, you're telling me you are going to violate the judge's discharge orders? I was out of there quicker than I've been out 30 years. I ain't had another charge since. And this is coming from a guy that's got 93 cases in 33 years. That all stopped 10 years ago, not one charge.
Wow. Kurt, there are people in the chat that may not be familiar with the genesis of what would possess you to go down this road and just ruin your life, becoming obsessed with this information, which is so difficult to explain to people, and it's so frustrating. I always want them to understand that it all started with a taser. Do you want to give a brief rundown of that initial incident, which caused?
Well, first of all, all you have to do is look at the avatar that I'm using for this call. Me and my son. I'm doing it because I don't want my son to live in this fucked up world. It's that simple. By the way, the word fuck. No, the word fuck is an old term. It's an old farmer's term that means to implant or occupy. So when I'm in the waters of mom, floating around in the first 7 days, but then I plant into her uterine wall. When I implant into mom's uterine wall, I'm a motherfucker. I hope everybody's laughing because it's supposed to be funny.
I'm just, someone was recently saying that they were surprised to hear the cussing because it's so different from Crow 777 radio. And I had to respond. It is very true that they are not the same person.
Okay, so but look at the fetal maternal property. Look at the fetal maternal placenta. Me still implanted into mom, which gives rise to a record, Curtis Richard Kallenbach. Curtis Richard Kallenbach is the document or the title to the fetal maternal placenta. Curtis Richard Kallenbach evidences a motherfucker.
So
I'm not even joking. This is real. I'm not trying to be crass. I'm telling you, I'm using real words from the 1700s.
Well,
no,
watch
we're
this
not
one,
offended
Kurt.
by words here. And Keith has pollution up on the screen right now.
Yeah, this is mid 14th century from Entom Online. Pollution, discharge of semen other than during sex.
The reason why you didn't hear me laugh is because my mind went into so many directions. Like I was thinking about all the times that I say the F word. So I was thinking about how, based on your definition, when you're fucking someone over, it really does make sense. That is such a complete sentence. If you fuck someone over, you're occupying them over what is a nice amount of occupation or like a non-consensual. It's just.
But literally, the birth certificated character is you're fucked.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, by using it, you are.
Right.
Okay, so
Right.
somebody asked a question. Somebody asked a question why I would do this. Look at the picture of me and my son. If that's not the greatest motivation of all time, you know what? Do you want to live in this world? This world is screwball. I don't even want to live in it. I don't want anything to do with what's going on in the world.
Specifically, they were asking if this started from a book or something, and I was like, no, it started from a tasing.
Yeah, so in 2010, I still consider myself a patriot. Seriously, I thought I was pretty hardcore. I walked to Washington, D.C. in 2009 thinking I was this great patriot. I learned a bunch of crap early on, really fast, by the way. But January of 2010, Debbie and I are coming back from a bar. I drank whatever quantity I wanted to drink at the time. And by the way, drinking alcohol to any limit is not against the law, not against the law. The THE means theos or God. Drinking is not against God's law. It's not against the laws of nature, not against the law at all. Those alcohol limits are within a community. It's a community standard that is not part of my existence. I'm a sojourner. I am not a citizen. I do not have to abide by citizen. What are they called? Policy. The policy that's set up for the citizenship. I don't think I'm trying to get out of it. I'm not trying to get out of anything. I just want to stand in the light of truth. I don't give a rip what you guys believe. Truth is outside of everything you believe. If you have a belief system, you're not standing in the light of truth. You're not. It's that simple. You're not standing in the light of truth if you believe something that is outside of reality. So anyway, in 2010 January, I get tased. And I'm thinking, how can a 48-year-old man, or whatever I was at the time, how can a stranger shoot a couple of barbs into my shoulder, which is a trespass across the membrane of my skin? He's actually entered my body. This is breaking and entering if I've ever even imagined it. But it's not. In their world, it's not. And so I didn't sit and bitch and moan to people like, hey, this place is corrupt. I didn't do that. I said, wait a minute here. If they could do it, or if they did do it, they could do it. And all I had to do was figure out how they're capable of doing it. And what I learned is that by leaving a piece of my biology in the public, becoming part of the common man, the common pool, the public pool, then I'm no longer private. So my biology is no longer private. Hell, even the common law itself, by its own definition, does not acknowledge absolute ownership, which means the common law, the common man, is owned by everybody. So there is no trespass. Anybody can do anything to you because they have a right to, because you're in the public. In my world, I've already learned this. I've already got it all. It's all mine now. It's all private. But you guys that have belief systems that you can't get past will always remain in the public. You'll never get where I am. I'm not trying to be arrogant. I'm just telling the truth. Nobody has taken the time. Sometimes I feel like I've wasted it, but I haven't, because my son is now part of my kingdom. My wife is part of my kingdom. My family is protected, and you guys are not. You guys are out there still. Your DNA is still in the public. It's still part of the public policy. You're still subject to all the bullshit, vaccines and masks and all that crap, because you're part of the diseased society, the diseased, broken society. I'm not. It took me 17 years to figure this crap out. And I'm telling you right now, if people want to learn this stuff, it's not that hard. All present and accounted for, from fertilization to last breath. That's it. I've actually distilled all my knowledge into one sentence.
All present and accounted for, from fertilization to last breath. from
Alpha to Omega.
Alpha to Omega, as referenced by
That's all it is.
Keith. Anything to add? We're about to hit 2 hours, and I mean, I can go forever with Kurt, but I do like doing it in chunks here and there.
Absolutely, yeah. It's an overload for me too. Like I said, he outdoes me by far. It's a way to catch up.
Well, this has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you both for joining me here tonight. And thank you so much for everyone who joined me in the chat. There are a number of people who showed up that did also write out that sentence and make that statement to the universe that we are accounted for. A lot of people that I think are in your PMA. I'm just going to remind everyone to go to the link in the description, check out Kurt's podcast and website and the playlist for so many episodes over the years. And also, El Pero, where should people go to find you and the work that you're doing?
Let me pull it up real quick and I'll drop it back.
Okay, cool. I'll show it on the screen. And Kurt, when is your next podcast episode going to be released?
I just put it out today.
You mentioned that, but is it weekly or just when the mood strikes you?
It usually happens every other week. I used to do them every week, but every other week. But they're 3 hours long typically, and it takes a long time for some people to listen to it. But it's tough. It's tough for new people to come in and realize how simple it is. They want to make it difficult. They think it's difficult because they're told it's difficult. It's not. It's not difficult. From fertilization to last breath is extraterritorial. It's that simple. You don't have to change your status. You don't have to do anything. You're already the monarch. You're already the king. No kings, Kurt. Well, I'm sorry. There is at least one that I know of. Me.
We did have a question in the chat, or a comment basically relating to the culpability of the that we have as a result of decisions our parents made by signing the birth certificate. And so that's what I always try to drive home, is it's just knowing and understanding what the truth is. Just the acknowledgement is more important than anyone realizes. I have Keith El Pero's channel on the screen, and I put the link in the chat, and I'll also paste it in the comment section so everyone could go and check out his channel as well. So is there any last ideas that anyone wants to throw out there before I play my dramatic music again?
Well,
I have one simple thing, but go ahead, Keith.
Well, I just wanted to mention that folks going to my channel, just remember I changed the platform. So when you see all the scary clowns and stuff, just go back a little bit further, and you'll see all the information videos that Kurt was talking about. I've got over 1,200 videos in there from my last 10 years.
And on my end, I really want people to understand that when I say my story, Keith can say my story. Rose can say my story, because we all have our own story from fertilization to last breath, and we're the author. And here's what you have to understand. My story and his story are mutually exclusive. They do not run at the same time. I'm fully present. History, I have never been there. I haven't entered it yet. I will not enter his story until I have passed, until I'm in the past. I have passed. So I'm always wholly present. And that's the difference. My story is mutually exclusive from his story. And that's the key.
All right. Thank you so much, gentlemen. I can't wait for the next time that we could possibly do this again. My place, your place, multi-stream, a podcast. We'll figure it out. Maybe one day we could even make a documentary about these ideas. I love big ideas. And I love you, Kurt. I certainly appreciate you being here, Keith. I think that you being here made this the best Kurt chat that I've ever had, because other times I'll try to bring someone else on and then I just totally regret it afterwards, because it's terribly wrong, and Kurt is so mean to people when they can't figure it out.
Well, I think Kurt knows me enough that I really don't care either way. You know, I'm not going to let that kind of stuff bother me anymore, and that's the main problem with most people. It gets
tough love.
Tough
love.
Yeah. Well, and that tough love is with yourself, because you're the one that you're hurting. So.
Okay, listen here, and in my defense, here's the thing: the reason I always end up correcting people is if I stay silent, it's acquiescence. If somebody says something stupid and I don't stop it, then it seems like I'm agreeing with it. So I always have to correct people for saying something stupid, and it comes off exactly like that. And you're always correcting me. You're always wrong.
Yeah.
It's really, and because you're coming from belief systems. And my point is that if I don't say anything, silence is acquiescence. I'm agreeing with you even in your own stupidity. I can't agree to that, so I have to speak up.
Right. Okay. That is such a great way to close this out, because I hate to be such a party pooper, no pun intended, with the Lanham
Be
Act.
blessed.
But every time a birthday comes around and someone wants to wish me a happy birthday, I hate to be a bummer, but it's the perfect opportunity to explain to them about the human slavery that's occurring. So anyway, this has been fantastic. I hope everyone has a fabulous night, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
All right. I hope everybody enjoyed it. I'm going to pull up her channel link. I did drop the link down there for the specific video we just watched. And here comes the link. So you can go check her out. That's Rose from Crow 777. So be sure you go check her out. And you folks know me. I love you, but I don't give a rat's ass whether you love me back or not. That's to say, I don't care if you hate me. I don't care if you don't respect me. That part's on you. So may God bless you and have a good day. Greetings, everyone. Keith here. Hoping everyone's having a good day. Enjoying life, living life, loving life. Be sure to hit those buttons, show your support. And there's a PayPal link below for anyone that wants to share some love. All is appreciated.